when it comes to the movie centers, Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan further cement themselves as one of the best duos in entertainment, and Ryan Coogler provides Jordan Peele some type of peership when it comes to being a black writer-director in horror movies that produce not just straight to streaming type stuff, but things that will actually get people out to the theaters. So to summarize the movie, it takes place in 1932 in or around Clarksdale, Mississippi, and focuses on twins, Elijah, who goes by Smoke, and Elias, who goes by Stack. They have some gangster ties back in Chicago that they left behind. Also, they had quite the reputation when they was in Mississippi before leaving for Chicago, but now it seems they want to go legit. I mean, granted, they want to bootleg liquor in order to get this club they have now going, but for the most part, they want to go legit. Give the sharecroppers, the poor, the people working on the fields, some place they can go to dress up, show out, have a good time. But of course, there's complications to this. Never mind that both men have relationship issues with their exes, either because in the case of Stack, his ex Mary is white passing, or when it comes to Smoke, his ex is someone who he has a much more complicated relationship with because of things that happen. But you gotta see the movie to know what happened with that. But the point of the matter is, those complicate things, though they kind of get smoothed over, but the real issue is they are having a juke joint that plays the blues, and with their young cousin Sammy, he's not necessarily a prodigy, but he's a notable player. And as the film tells you from the beginning, music not only riles up the soul, but it could also rile up the dead and demons. And unfortunately for twins, they find themselves attracting vampires to their juke joint, and it becomes quite the bloody affair. So getting to the review section, the music, this is one of those things similar to challenges where you're going to find yourself having to listen to the soundtrack, having to listen to music similar to it to just get it out your system, because everything else would sound like straight up dog mess. It will feel like pipe cleaners in your ears until you just get enough blues music into you and then kind of get a sort of rinse out of it. And getting to the second highlight, I would also say that the humor is very good. I mean, not as high as the music, but their character, what's his name again? Delta Slim, played by Delroy Lindo, who was in that show with Kerry Washington not too long ago. Unprison, I think it was. He brings the funny in that old head who might have been drinking most of his life, and you kind of think that he's a screw up, but he brings a talent of a musicianship, he brings good stories, but he's also a southern dude who's a little bit of a mess, and it's hilarious at times. And I would even say, if you're used to horror movies, he's that one cat that always knows how to lighten up a situation and make it kind of like break the issues. And I would even say, as many know, the Wayans brothers are making another scary movie. I would say if they need anybody up there in age, even though no one can replace John Witherspoon, they should definitely look into Delroy Lindo in order to get someone from the older crowd onto their movie. But moving beyond that, I have to also say, when it comes to the romance angle on this, it is far better than what you see in most horror movies. Stack and Mary, and also Annie and Smoke, they just do something for you. It's romantic, it's sexy. You get this good sense of ride or die with both of them. And in many ways, it kind of makes me hope that with Ryan Coogler always having a little bit touch of romance with his movies, he would just, for the next one, just go straight up. John Singleton? That might be the name I'm thinking of. The one with the Poetic Justice. I want to see him kind of venture into that and just do a romantic drama, or just do a straight up romance, or maybe even a romantic comedy, because with him writing and directing this film, you can see he has the comedic elements. He seems to love when characters like Stack and Mary seem to be, even if there are complications in relationships, still drawn to each other. There's such chemistry, as I'm sure you've seen between Michael B. Jordan and Haley Steinfeld in interviews. And I want to see him take that further, just based off of the way he wrote these relationships. For I should know, Stack and Mary, it's not just about the complication of Mary being white passing. It's also that they're young, so you get a different vibe with them. And then when it comes to Annie and Smoke, you get the sense that they're mature, they've been through stuff, but they're still working it out, having communication, conversation. She still loves him, even though he kind of disappeared on her. And just getting these two different takes, and you see Michael B. Jordan play up on both of them well, at least is such a beautiful thing. And I would even say, it's kind of sad that when it comes to the press run, you see mostly Michael B. Jordan with Haley Steinfeld. You don't really get to see him much with, I'm going to butcher her name, Wunmi Masako. Like, she's not a new character. You've seen her in anything from, I'm about to say Lackawanna Blues, totally different character, but she would be good in that if they ever remade it. Separate thought. Stick with me here. She was in Lovecraft Country, and she was also in... She was in this show that I really loved that came out on Netflix, but originally BBC. She played a detective, but I can't... Or was she a psychopath? Let's get back on topic. When it comes to how Ryan Coogler writes them as significant others, it's beautiful, but I should also note as individuals, they make them very interesting too. For when it comes to Mary, it's very interesting to see, especially since Haley Steinfeld herself is... I'm going to say multiracial, because I think, like, her character, she's one or two generations separated from having a ethnically black person in her ancestry. So you can see she kind of taps into the complication of she owns this piece of her in terms of having a black ancestor, yet at the same time is white passage, to the point where if she never said anything, nobody would ever know. And it makes you think that if they ever... Oh my God, there was this movie that my mom keeps talking about a young white girl who passed and wanted to be... I'll put it at the bottom. It's too much, and we're really going off track too many damn times. Point of the matter is, Mary is given this level of complication outside of whatever relationship issue she has that makes you very much invested in who she is and if she survives, which is a notable thing when it comes to any horror movie. You really do care about whether these characters survive. And the same goes for Annie. Her being a Yoruba priestess or whatever kind of spell doctor she is, it draws you in, and it's not just something that feels gimmicky. It's useful in terms of them having to combat vampires. It gives you a sense that she loved her man because she gave him this amulet or something to keep him protected. She talks about praying for him and everything, and it really just makes you think about who these women are as individuals. It gives you a sense of not only how they attracted these men, but what attracted these men to them. And honestly, oftentimes when it's a male lead and he has some type of love interest, it feels like there's an imbalance and the love interest is nothing but that. But I would say when it comes to Mary and Annie, they do far more than just make them attractive actresses who can play off the lead actor well. But moving on from that, on top of the romance being something that gets you, also the sense of community and also how things are presented could potentially bring you to tears. Because yes, these twins used to be gangsters. They possibly robbed or did wrong some Chicago mob boss out there, and now they took their money and they're trying to build something. But it's strangely beautiful to watch the community, their family, kind of come and support them to turn this old sawmill into a club. And on top of that, because you already get a hint of how this is all gonna go, it's kind of heartbreaking to see these two men have almost everything they can want in terms of having this club that can support them financially, having their woman back in their lives, kind of get themselves together and kind of get away from all the drama and nonsense. And then you have to take note that it's not going to probably last. This vampire's going to come, going to destroy everything, and it just makes you more emotional than you expect a horror movie to do so. And that's why, even though I can imagine Ryan Coogler getting comparisons to Jordan Peele and what he's done, I feel like Coogler has done something far different in terms of what he wants to present with horror compared to Jordan Peele. And the only thing that's perhaps similar between the two is them both being black men. But bringing race and culture into it, I have to admit, it was very interesting to watch the connections between black people, Asian people, and even in terms of Remick the Vampire, the Irish. And I'm not going to go too deep into it because I'm a little bit rusty on my history, but it's all three of these ethnic groups have been, in some way or another, throughout the American history, subjugated to either some form of racism, prejudice, ostracization, whichever word you prefer. And it's interesting to watch them interact with one another in terms of the Asian people in the film, Bo and his wife, Grace, I want to say her name is, they own a general store for black people and a general store that's whites only. Yet it seems when it comes to Bo interacting with the twins, it's more than a whoever has money that's green type of situation. There is a sense of camaraderie, there's a sense of friendship, and there's a sense of they may accept us more, but they still don't accept us, period. And it reminds you, especially since Ryan Coogler's from Oakland, of all the civil rights movements that had both Asian and African Americans working together, and it's not something that's strongly presented in the film, but it definitely feels like it's a nod to that. And then bringing in the Irish, I remember at least in school there was a talk about how there was a time in history when it came to Black Americans and Irish Americans, there was a closeness because we were both some of the poorest people in the Americas. And until they really pushed the Irish as being seen more as white and more Anglican, I think that's what I'm looking for, since they had a form of camaraderie with us that, may not be skin folk, but they were kinfolk. And in many ways, as you watch Remick, who loves listening to the blues and stuff like that, you see kind of a difference between what the twins talk about in terms of people wanting black music without black people, and then what Remick is kind of presenting in terms of he wants the music and the people, but of course he's going about it the wrong way. And I would even say just watching him do what I hope is the correct term, an Irish jig, while kind of doing his form of blues music, it felt like, for some, it could definitely seem like it's appropriation, but to me, it kind of seemed like appreciation. And I don't know if that's just because I'm so used to Jack O'Connell from back in the Skins days, so I can't really see him as like a racist person in the context of this film, but also because the way that Remick comes off, he seems less like a villain in terms of trying to be on the level of the Klan or whatever, and he just seems like misguided, maybe alone or lonely, and trying to potentially just create a coven of music lovers, especially blues lovers. And it definitely feels like, depending on what way you want to look at Remick, he can either be truly a nasty evil character or maybe a little bit someone who lives in the gray a bit. And I appreciate that, because one thing I hate when it comes to movies is nowadays, especially horror movies, is when the villain is just cut and dry. Or if they're not cut and dry and doing some real horrific kind of like mind-blowing things, then they often come out boring. But with Remick, because there's enough gray in the way that he's performed, it's not just a sense of, when it comes to Jack O'Connell, him thinking that his character is some type of neutral or kind of ambiguous character. You generally get a sense that when it comes to Remick, he might do things that you may not agree with, but at the same time, you can get the sense that maybe he wasn't necessarily trying to screw everyone over or cause true damage. Which leads to the last highlight, and that's just the jump scares. And to be clear, the jump scares, there's very few, and they're only really in the early parts of the film. But just with the way Coogler presents them, it shows if he really wanted to, he could have made this something that tortures your nervous system throughout the whole film, but he decided not to. And for that, I'm appreciative. So, getting to the on the fence topic, admittedly, this is probably more of a me thing than a movie thing, but I have to admit, even though it's clear when it comes to Smoke and Stack, there's certain things that are clearly different about them. From Smoke mostly wearing blue and Stack mostly wearing red, I have to admit, when you can't clearly see them wear one of these colors, or you don't see them with their particular gal, it can be a little confusing to know who's who. And yes, they have different personalities, may talk slightly different, but it's one of those things where, yes, this is a 2-hour movie, so you do spend a lot of time with them, but it can be very difficult when that color differential thing is not involved, which for some could cause issues. For others, you may not care because it's either way Michael B. Jordan. And this leads to the last on the fence topic, and that's just alongside showing African Americans and Asian people, there's also indigenous people in this. And from what represented, indigenous people are some kind of vampire hunters, and they were chasing down Remick at the beginning of the movie. But unfortunately, it seems in this movie, which takes place over 24 hours, these vampire hunters of the indigenous people, they're like, nah, we don't work at night. We don't hunt at night. We just gonna go back home. And it seems kind of like a disservice for them to only operate at night. I mean, only operate during day hours when vampires are at their weakest. So I have to admit, between not really getting to see more of them, and on top of that, them kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, kind of punking out, it was a little bit frustrating, especially since they could have also kind of brought into the sphere of how the black people interact with the Native Americans, Indigenous Americans, and kind of gone more into how that dynamic worked. But unfortunately, this film skips out on that. But overall, when it comes to Sinners, it's definitely going to be probably one of our favorite films of the year. And I would say from almost every angle you can think of, I fully imagine people making think pieces about this just because of how deep Ryan Coogler decides to go. And he never takes it so far that it becomes a think piece outright, in terms of kind of becoming overbanned by how he wants to talk about the evolution of black music, how he wants to talk about racial and ethnic relations. He goes into that enough for you to understand that he knows the history, he knows what he's talking about, but he never takes it so far where it feels like it could alienate general population. This movie is still very much about entertaining an audience, but at the same time, it doesn't want to be dumb. And creating something like that feels very rare and perhaps even difficult for a horror movie. So that's why it's something that deserves all the praise it gets and will surely be on a lot of top lists when it comes to the best films that came out in 2025.